What was levirate marriage under the law of Moses? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 25. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 10. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy 25, beginning at verse 1. If there is a dispute between men, and they come to court, that the judges may judge them, and they justify the righteous and condemn the wicked, then it shall be, if the wicked man deserves to be beaten, that the judge will cause him to lie down and be beaten in his presence, according to his guilt, with a certain number of blows. 40 blows he may give him, and no more, lest he should exceed this and beat him with many blows above these, and your brother be humiliated in your sight. You shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go in to her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to be the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out in Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, My husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, So shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Israel the house of him who had his sandal removed. Coming now to chapter 25, verses 1 to 3, we have an issue of justice. Remember, under the law of Moses, justice was to be meted out no matter who the person was. That means that the righteous were to be vindicated and the wicked were to be punished. Therefore, if a person committed a crime in which he deserved to be beaten, then that punishment was to actually be executed. However, the punishment here was not to exceed 40 lashes, lest the wounds inflicted be too great. In doing this, God was ensuring that justice was done, but that someone wasn't going to die who didn't do something worthy of death. In the New Testament, we're going to see the Apostle Paul say that on 5 occasions he received 40 stripes minus 1. Why didn't he receive 40 stripes? Because typically the instrument used to beat someone with was made with 3 whip-like instruments. Thus, 1 blow would yield 3 stripes. Therefore, 13 blows would yield 39 stripes. If 1 more blow was taken, that would yield 42 stripes, 2 more than was permitted by law. So typically, 39 stripes were inflicted upon a person deserving of being beaten. Verse 4 says that when an ox treads out the grain, you're not to place a muzzle on him. Treading out the grain was hard, tiring work. Putting a muzzle on the ox would prevent the ox from eating any of the grain, but such a practice was cruel, for the ox was doing the work. It deserved to eat. Thus God was going to provide for the oxen in telling Israel not to muzzle the animal that is doing necessary work for you. For those of you who mark your Bibles, it would be good to place a mark here, for the Apostle Paul is going to use this verse to make a New Testament application in the book of 1 Corinthians. In verses 5 to 10, we come to the custom of levirate marriages. What we must realize is that these types of marriages preceded the law of Moses. In fact, we ran into them the first time in Genesis 38 with the situation of Onan. The reason why these marriages were important, and God codified them in a law here, was because wealth was handed down in this culture by inheritance. Thus, if a man died with no children, either male or female, that meant that his land and possessions would pass to his next of kin, his brother, leaving the wife with the possibility of becoming impoverished. In order to prevent this, if a man died with no children, then what was to happen was the man's next of kin was to take his brother's wife, make her his wife, and then raise up a child through her that would be counted as his brother's child. This child then could inherit what would have been handed down through the man who had died. What if, though, a man didn't want to take his brother's wife in order to raise up a child in his brother's name? Well, Onan died because he didn't do this. But that wouldn't be the punishment here. Instead, the wife of the dead man was to be brought to the elders of the city in order to try and convince him to do so. If he still refused, then the wife of the man was to, in the presence of the elders, take off the brother's sandal, spit in his face, and say, "So it shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house." The taking off of the sandal by the woman was an act of indignity for a man, a declaration that he was not worthy to stand in his brother's place, and thus he was being rejected by the woman herself. In other words, the man was being shamed for his willful act of not raising up seed for his brother, and that shame would be carried on with him even after this event. Now, even though this woman had been rejected by the next of kin, didn't mean that this woman couldn't try again with the second person in line from her husband. It just meant that the first in line was rejected. We're going to see this process play out in our study of Ruth, so please mark this passage in your Bibles, for we will come back to it, the Lord willing, when we get to that study. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 11 to 19, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.